My name is Chris Turner. I work at ILM. I'm a paint and photo artist. Basically that involves doing cleanup of footage and images that have been shot on set. This means removing wires and markers, props and things that the director doesn't want to be in there. It can be anything really. I started off wanting to do filmmaking. I grew up watching Lord of the Rings, things like that, and seeing the behind the scenes, and basically wanted to do anything that could get me into that world. I went to Hertfordshire and it seemed awesome. The lecturers were great, the course showreels and students that I met seemed great. From second year onwards, I was progressively networking, talking to people, showing my work to recruiters and companies and people in companies, and getting feedback. So by the time I graduated, I'd already got feedback from people who were going to be looking at my CV anyway. And by the time I graduated, I was fine in the end. We learn all about how it started from matte paintings on glass panes all the way through to the special effects stuff in the 80s with Star Wars. And yeah, we kind of were taught the progression and how the software nowadays actually obviously makes it so much easier to do and sort of democratizes the process and lets you sort of do the job way cheaper and more efficiently than before. Nowadays we use sort of things called splines, which is kind of interpolated lines which you define a point here, and a point here, and it will interpolate a curve, for example. And you can use these splines to basically trace around characters and animate them per frame. Back then, you'd have to literally get a paintbrush and on a piece of glass, maybe, literally draw a black outline around a character, and everything which isn't black will be not filmed, and everything which is blacked will be filmed, basically. So it's way more painstaking back in the day. And you're working on actual raw materials, so glass, and that's expensive. Also, there's like imperfection back then, because if you're drawing every single frame and painting it, then it's not going to be accurate. If you've got a shot of a person who isn't really moving much, the edge of their arm would probably shimmer because you're painting every frame. It's going to look different. Nowadays, it's much more smoother. So back then, obviously, you'd have like maybe 30–40% of like a big film could be visual effects shots. But nowadays, because it looks real in most high production films, most of it will look good. So you can have films which have some sequences where all the characters can be full CG and you won't really notice. I have like a good understanding of the other departments, so I can use software like Maya and I can do some tracking. I can do things that aren't particularly what I do as a job now, but can help me here and there. I kind of miss that because it's way more specialized now that I'm doing this particular job. For example, we usually get models from the 3D department which are scanned on set, and usually our job is to project 2D images onto those to help us with our paint work. It's easier sometimes just to go in there and fix those 3D models and make them work ourselves and send them to the 3D department and get them to do it. So in my shoes, that knowledge of knowing Maya at uni has helped me a lot, whereas people who haven't learned that or just went straight into the job 8 years ago won't have that skill. That was a shot that used both parts of my kind of job, so roto and paint. So my job was basically to remove the stand-in on set who was the robot, paint him out, and then they put the CG version there. The guy's name's Alan Tudyk, I think, and he basically was on stilts, walking around acting like the robot, and my job was to paint him out. There's so many films being made, there's always going to be opportunities. There are some issues plaguing the industry, so outsourcing to third-party companies in India, for example, they do the work much quicker and cheaper. It might not be to our standard, but it can be done quicker, and so a lot of the time it will be outsourced there. We're undercutting the labour in London, for example, which is fine for us, although it does mean that the people coming into the industry whose usual entry-level job would be roto or paint like mine, it's probably harder to find maybe, at least in London. Yeah, I mean, there's always stuff being developed in-house, so at ILM they've got a team of people working on tools to help you do your job quicker and faster and cheaper. On the horizon, in the far future, will be things like AI probably helping out a lot. For example, in the roto part of our job, rotoscoping, involving basically creating black and white mattes to define what elements there are in the frame, so you can remove things and put things behind things. That's going to be probably eventually automated because technology will get to a point where that can be done. Nowadays, the software is much cheaper and the work is much easier, so the entry level, like the bar, is much lower, which I'd say is a good thing. It means that there's always going to be people entering the industry and pushing the technology forwards. We're basically spending time doing the creative filmmaking and creating nice images. We're not spending time trying to work out why an image won't work why the render's not working, why it's broken. The next job is as a compositor. That means taking all the elements given to you by the different departments, so CG renders, paintwork by myself, for example, and just adding everything together, collating it into the final shot and making the actual images. So that's my eventual goal, and then past that, I don't really know. I'd like to get back into filmmaking at some point, because that was the first sort of goal I had before uni, and then I thought I'm going to do a sort of sidetrack and go into VFX as a way in from the outside. But now I think I probably will go back there eventually.